Town Hall meeting for November 17th, 2015. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to start the meeting off today with a moment of silence for the victims in Paris and in Beirut and all the other places, the plane crash, the Russian plane that was brought down by a bomb, and all the other places where terrorists or cowards are taking advantage of innocent people. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Tonight, our town hall meeting, we're going to talk about the 2016 tentative budget presentation and discussion. This is not the public hearing. The public hearing will be held next Tuesday at our legislative meeting at 16 Groton Avenue. But Maddie, would you like to give us a presentation on our 2016 budget? Thank you.
Can everyone in the back row hear me? Okay, good evening. So we are going to go over the 2016 tentative budget, also known as the supervisor's budget. We actually turned this in on October 30th, so it's about 2.5 weeks old at this point. And the next step is obviously the public hearing that the supervisor mentioned. The board will meet with the department heads again if they so choose and make some changes if that's how they feel. And then we hope to adopt the budget at the December 9th meeting. So this might be familiar to most of you, the budget preparation process. So we're talking about the budget for the town of Ossining from January 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2016. And it seems we start a little bit earlier on this process every year, but we usually start about the first week in August. We give estimate forms out to our department heads, so they basically give us their wish list. Here's what I think my people should be paid. Most of that is contractual. Here are the sorts of supplies I need, and here are the capital projects that I'm planning for the next year. So we gather all that information, we plug it in, and then the supervisor does her magic. So we put together the tentative budget and submit it to the town clerk. And by New York state law, it's a little bit different in Westchester than it is in other counties in the state. We have to adopt by December 20th of 2015. So the town budget has multiple components. The town general is a tax that's paid by everyone who lives in the town of Ossining. So that's, as you've heard us say a couple of times now, all of the village of Ossining, the unincorporated area of the town, and 91% of the village of Briarcliff Manor. There are also certain taxes that only go to the unincorporated area. So you pay there for your police services, your highway department, building planning, zoning, and code enforcement, and then the special districts, the townwide water district, light, fire, refuse, ambulance, and our sewer districts. In the town general budget, which you'll see in a little while in a pie chart, there are many, many, many functions, and this happens to be the smallest part of your taxes. So you have many departments that fall under this umbrella. So we have the town and village consolidated court, the administration, which is the town board and the supervisor's office, financial controller, which is through an IMA with the village of Ossining, tax collection, assessment, our town clerk, and elections, senior services, including call a cab, our parks, facilities maintenance, and ambulance services, which is something that we have the Mid-Hudson Ambulance District. So it's all the village of Ossining and all of the unincorporated area. Briarcliff is not included. So then unincorporated area services. Right now we pay for the police department, recreation, which is new to this budget as of last year, building, engineering, planning and zoning, stormwater management, the highway department, refuse and recycling collection, which is contracted out, and fire protection services, which comes from the village of Ossining and the village of Briarcliff. So here are some budget highlights. We have a 1.89% rate increase in the general fund and a 0.41% increase in the unincorporated area funds. The 20 fund, which is the unincorporated area fund, and the 31 fund, which is the highway fund, are actually a blended rate. It's exactly the same tax base. So the highway was a little bit higher and the unincorporated area was 0, so meeting halfway in the middle is a 0.41. We continue to keep contingency accounts in town general and the unincorporated. We continued a 6-year capital plan for all of our departments. We've seen a decreased taxable assessed value in both the unincorporated area and in the town general, mainly as a result of all of the SCARs, the small claims, and tax tertiaries that we've seen over the past year. Our health insurance has gone up 7.4%. It was anticipated until 3 days ago. Now we know it's a 7.4% increase. $100,000 from the general fund was used to supplement the cemetery budget. And earlier this year, the cemetery employees were brought in-house, so they're now town of Ossining employees. We used $50,000 in general fund balance to supplement the general fund operating budget for 2016. And a big highlight is that we have money set aside for 2017 for the police contract increase and also for the jump that we plan to see in workers' compensation premiums for 2017 as well. So what part of your taxes are affected? I mentioned this a little earlier. This red portion right here, the town of Ossining, is less than 2% of everyone's tax bill in the town of Ossining. Depending on whether you're in a village or in the unincorporated area, the rest of the percentages shake out a little bit differently. But everybody pays around 12% for county, 2% for schools. We usually use 65% for schools, and then the local municipalities, so whether the village or your unincorporated area plus your special districts is the remainder. So I have just a couple of quick pie charts just so you can see. The town general revenue, which is again the tax that's paid by everyone in the town of Ossining, is mainly property tax driven. You can see, and we'll post this on the website because I know that the captions are sort of small, but the only other revenue sources we have are interest and earnings, fines and forfeitures. We get state and federal aid for our nutrition program, as well as mortgage tax. Those are our main revenues in the general fund. Similarly, in the unincorporated area, most of that revenue comes from property taxes, with a good chunk coming from sales tax as well. So some specifics about the 2016 tax cap. So New York State tax cap legislation states that a municipality is entitled to raise the levy by 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. For 2016, our rate of inflation was 0.73%. Last year, I believe our tax cap was 1.54%, so we're at just less than half for this coming calendar year. The legislation also allows for a growth factor, which has to do with building that goes on within the town borders, so that gave us a little bit of a boost as well. We're entitled to carry over funds we did not use towards the 2015 levy into 2016, and we're still under the tax cap by just over $153,000 for 2016. So this is often a question that we get asked when people come in and they say, well, can't I just have another $20,000? We just need a new car, or we just need a new truck. In the general fund, you can see that 1 point, so a 1% increase, is almost $33,000. That's it. So even if we got a full 2% and we wanted to do something in the general fund, that's not really that much money. That's barely enough to hire one new employee. Similarly, in the unincorporated funds, you have a little bit more than that, a little bit wider of a base to draw from, but it's still not a whole lot of money for 1 percentage point. As I mentioned earlier, our health insurance rates have gone up like 7.5% for this year. So doing some quick math, that would only be enough to absorb the increase in premium for half of our employees in the general fund. So before we've given any contractual raises, before any of our other bills have gone up, we've already said goodbye to that 1% increase. So just some numbers so you sort of see what tight constraints municipalities are working under the tax cap. So some facts and figures. Again, these are the rates that we're proposing in the town general and in the unincorporated area, as well as the average residential tax for both. You can see in town general, under this proposed budget, we're looking at about a $5 increase total in the town general tax, and about a $3 increase in the unincorporated area from 2015. We go through this every year as well. So the charges that unincorporated area residents are paying for the special district charges. So again, it's a combined rate, $514 for refuse and recycling, fire protection and street lighting, about $75 a year for ambulance, and $113 a year for sewer service, unless you're also part of the North State Road Sewer District. So if you live in the unincorporated area, you pay about $3,100 a year in town taxes. So obviously that's not inclusive of county and school taxes, but still a pretty good deal, $3,100 for your whole administration. So to speak a little bit more, just so you can see our expenditures in the general fund, again, this is the one that everyone pays. It's just over $5 million, but it covers all of the departments you see here on the right-hand side. So you're definitely getting a good bang for your buck as far as the general fund is concerned. Unincorporated expenditures, highway is a big part of that. Like we said, we meld it together because it's the same tax base. And the police contract, which includes the reserve that I spoke about earlier, is another big chunk of those taxes. And again, you can see almost a third of our highway budget goes to benefits: workers' compensation, medical, dental, life. So the changes for the unincorporated budget. We have, like I said earlier, set aside reserves for the police contract increase. We started the contract with the Village of Ossining for 2015. So this year, we're here. 2016, we go down just a bit, but then there is a jump going into 2017 for a variety of reasons. So the supervisor wanted us to put aside some money so that that cost would be defrayed going into 2017 for the budgeting process next year. There's also a similar reserve put aside for workers' compensation, as well as all monies for the 2017 bond call on 507 North State Road. There's going to be a transfer of $75,000 from the unincorporated fund to the highway fund. Again, it's the same pool of taxpayers, so it's really just one hand paying the other. And then 35% of 4 general fund salaries, totaling $66,326, is to be moved to the 20 fund, the unincorporated area fund. So that's the budget officer, the confidential secretary, the town attorney, and the deputy town attorney. And this is something that we had discussed, mainly because a lot of work that gets done in the town administration is done solely for the benefit of the unincorporated area residents. For example, our attorney, when he attends planning board meetings, zoning board meetings, working on the local laws, the comprehensive plan, that is only to benefit the unincorporated area of the town. Similarly, myself, the confidential secretary, we do a lot of work assisting the planning and zoning and building departments, doing all personnel, hiring, disciplinary work for the building, highway department, and so that is what explains the 35%, which is probably a very accurate number out of how much time is spent by these 4 employees. And the budget is available on the website. I'll post this presentation in the morning, and does anyone have any questions?
Hi. So I want to first start and thank you for this budget. I think it's generally a pretty good budget. I think you guys worked very hard. I want to thank the supervisor and Maddie and Tom and Dale. I think we probably put many hours into it. I do have some questions. I do have one portion that I would like to discuss much more. I think this issue with respect to transferring 35% over from the portions of 4 employees under the town budget to the unincorporated town concerns me and puzzles me for a few reasons. I absolutely understand that portions of people's day-to-day work in the administration and in these departments can be melded between what is town general, what is unincorporated town. I think starting to parcel out who does how much of what percentage during their time in their offices starts to become a very slippery slope. I think we already have a history of different departments who are under different budget lines helping each other out. And at this point, we haven't gotten into a place where we are parceling. We have a highway department who helps the parks department. The highway is unincorporated, the parks is town general. We have the parks department who very much helps the highway department. And that's a good thing. But throughout time, we, in the unincorporated town residents, have had areas where they didn't necessarily receive funding sources or credits or paid more in different places. And I can give you some of those examples. We have, for a very long time, if ever until more recently, cable franchise fees, which were supposed to be going to the unincorporated town, or their portion was supposed to be going, and it was not until, I'm sure somebody in this room could do a better accurate timing about how long ago that was, but I don't think it was more than 5 years ago, maybe. For a very long time, the unincorporated town residents had to pay a higher fee for the recreation fees because the town itself at some point decided it wasn't going to, I think, pay into the pool. We still have a place where the mortgage recording tax fees, which is the fees that come in when people sell their houses, I think Wayne can tell me if that's correct. We have a place where the county sends those funds and disperses them to the village of Ossining gets its portion, the village of Briarcliff gets its portion, and the town of Ossining general fund gets a portion. There is no portion that goes to the unincorporated town. That actually is due to an opinion by the state comptroller. However, no board that has sat at this point has agreed to pass a resolution asking our legislators to have that changed, which it is a high possibility that that could be changed. You know, we have a water rate that is higher than the villages because we buy our water, and there are reasons, but it is higher, and there are lots of things in that water rate. And so we also have a confidential secretary, which I understand is someone who is trying to help, but previously there was no confidential secretary for a few years. And while I appreciate that it's gone down to a part-time position, the fact that now we're going to be paying supposedly 35% of a position that we didn't even have for years, I just think it is not the right way to go. And I think that while it's laudable that there has been money set aside, and I do thank you. I mean, the fact that we have a board and a supervisor who is leaving money in places to pay off bills in the present is a wonderful thing. But we do have some money set aside for things, and that money can be that money, you know, there's a portion of that. If it's $66,000, there is $66,000 that can be utilized out of it. So I want to start off with that, and if we want to talk about that and then go on to other questions, that's fine.
First of all, to go back to the confidential secretary, it was only in 2012 and 13 that we, probably 14, that we didn't have a confidential secretary, and that was a choice that we made, and that was to be able to control the budget and bring the budget in line, and to eventually to make the town and the unincorporated part of the town a much stronger financial picture. It was a sacrifice that the supervisor's office took. We brought somebody in full-time this year. We think that it can be done as a part-time job, so we did that too. I want to just address that over the years, this board and the previous board that, well, all but Kim was a member of, since 2012, have done our best to move different revenues into the different lines that they should be. It is very common in government to have people assigned to a department or to a budget that they do work in. This is not anything like when the highway and the parks help each other, because that's on a job-by-job basis. In the unincorporated area, there's certain job functions that the budget director and the attorneys and the confidential secretary do 100% for the unincorporated area. So they take care of all of the payroll and the and the hiring and the whole personnel files and the insurances, and we can go on and on and on. So it is appropriate to put a portion of their salaries, just like we moved revenues, we need to move expenditures too. So when it's appropriate. That doesn't mean that it's done. That doesn't mean that the next board is not going to address different things. As far as the mortgage tax is concerned, that is something that was directed by the comptroller's office. It's been the opinion of the auditors, and what it is that the village of Briarcliff gets a small portion, the village of Austin gets a small portion, and the majority of the portion goes into the town general fund. I want to make it clear that when we renegotiated the recreation IMA last year, it was the town general fund that was paying the recreation fees. So in order to negotiate it and get the fees down of the individual families, we renegotiated and spent weeks working on that. We've spent up to 2 months this year alone working on different IMAs, and 90% of them would have affected the unincorporated area, and we're proud of doing that because we are the local government for the unincorporated. That said, we're constantly looking at ways of saving. It was very, very important to be able, as you saw, when you saw that $50,000 is a percentage point, the unincorporated budget would have gone up next year almost 2.5% just on the police budget had we not been able to reserve those funds. So we're very proud of that too. So while I appreciate your comments and you're more than welcome to have them, we need to keep apples to apples, and I think that the 4 people that do the job that we moved over, plus everybody else, this board does a lot of work for the unincorporated. I do a lot of work for the unincorporated. You can't move elected officials, so we didn't. I think that we have to understand that. I'm sure we'll get some comments about it later, but I want to see if anybody else has a comment.
Sure.
Just with respect to Councilwoman Jeffries' comment on the 4 individuals that were moved over, I too have heard some comments from residents that were concerned about that, but this is just a fraction of the employees for the town that are being moved over. They are being moved over only as, it's 35%. Seems like a lot, and it is a lot, but it's also only 1/3. So it's 2/3 general fund, 1/3 unincorporated fund. So if you include the fact that it's approximately 1/3, plus there's only 4 individuals, plus one of them is only part-time, plus the other 3 do a substantial amount of work for the unincorporated almost exclusively, at least in certain areas. I would consider this, and I do consider this, a fair reallocation of these resources. It's fair. Is it perfect? I don't know. Like you said, it hasn't been calculated to the dollar, but I don't know if you can do that. But the fact is that these 4 years, to my knowledge, these individuals have not been accountable, unincorporated funds have not been allocated towards these individuals when they probably should have for several prior administrations. So is this pendulum swinging a little bit in the other direction? Maybe, but this is, I think, consistent with this board's approach to try to level the playing field. Where there should be some allocation, we're making allocations. Where there should be none, we're trying to eliminate or trying to renegotiate IMAs that are more fair and more accurate. I think this is more accurate at 35% than it was at 0%. So we're trying to do our best to reallocate fairly. There will be time in the coming years if this is not a fair approach to readjust and tweak. But I think this is much more fair than it has been in the past. But I too have heard your comments. I appreciate the residents' concern. I share their concerns, but I think this is a step in the right direction.
Yes, I just want to say doing the budget is not something I look forward to because it's a lot of long hours, a lot of crazy times you have to come in and you stay. But I do want to just say that I think Madam Supervisor and Matty, you guys did a great job. I know that we'll never get a perfect budget. And I hope everybody else understands you're never going to get perfect. You have to deal with things as they are. Now, when a lot of times we look at, I won't try to come up with the numbers, but you have small amount of money. And if you move it from one place to the other, somebody's not going to like it. If you move a large amount, somebody's not going to like it. So you have to do what you believe is the right thing to do. And when that's done, at the end of the day, you feel good whether it's right, wrong, or indifference. But you know that you tried. And I think that's the best thing we can do.
Just want to point out that there's a lot of other people that work and they split their time between the unincorporated and the town general, and that would become, we just thought this was an appropriate place to start. It wasn't that we were looking to move all the different actions that people take over to different things, but it was important to start. It was important to be able to work out a plan that we have worked very hard on for the last 4 years and are very, very proud of the work we've done on it and very proud of the way we monitor the budget. No one's going to be happy all the time, but we'll see how it goes from there.
I appreciate all those comments, and I appreciate the thought process. And I think that there could be a thought that some of these people work a certain amount of time on, a line, like I said. However, I think that part of the reasoning why there's a pushback from people about it is because for so long, in many other ways, there have been things that they didn't consider completely on the playing field that it should have been, such as revenue that wasn't put into the line for a long time, such as, there are still, we still have residents who are not completely happy about the fact that half of the legal bills for the 1720 was in the unincorporated. Now, you would say, well, of course it should be, because it involves 17 and 20. The other side of that argument is it wasn't a problem for 17 and 20. If 17 and 20 went with Briarcliff, then that wasn't a problem. The problem would have ended up being with the rest of the town and how they would deal with that. So there are different ways of thinking of it. I do think that the knee-jerk reaction against this is the fact that there have been years where the unincorporated town feels that they have either not gotten their due or overpaid their due. And so that's where that comes from. I'm happy to move on. I think we'll see what happens.
I just want to make one more statement. I want to thank the many, many residents that are not going to come to a meeting like this, that emailed or called and said they were very happy with the budget too, the way it was, both from the unincorporated area and the town general, from Briarcliff, from the village of Ossining. And so I'm very, very happy with those calls too. So there's been there's a whole silent majority out there, and a lot of them have come forward, and we're very happy with that too. So let's move on from there.
Thank you. I apologize. The first thing that I should have said when I took the microphone was thank you to Sue, Madam Supervisor, and Matty. For those of us that participate behind the scenes from time to time, the work that your office does is extraordinary. The meticulous attention to detail is phenomenal, and we come in for meetings, but that's usually after you guys have put, no doubt, endless hours and maybe some sleepless nights into the product that we get to look at and we get to make comments to, or we have some input to. But your work is greatly appreciated, so thank you. Also, just because it came up in one of the points about the mortgage recording tax revenues, I personally believe that more that there should be a real allocation of those funds. However, I personally researched the state law on this. I looked at the Attorney General opinions and State Department opinions, and that is the way the law is written. So it is, I believe, subject to some modification, but until the state legislature changes the state law on mortgage recording tax, that's the way it is.
You didn't hear what I said before.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that I'm just adding that I personally tried to input a change in that area. It's impossible to do it legally.
Okay.
No, I would like to refer to that. I did say before you came here that that is true, the state comptroller has an opinion. This board and any previous board could make a resolution asking the state legislators, our state legislators, to change that. And it is something that happens all the time in Albany. This board chose not to go ahead with that. So
I didn't choose to not do
we discussed it.
that. Okay.
So
You can do it next year.
So I'm just, to the point, you're right, but there were things that can be done on this level to have changed that, and that has not been done. So,
We just want to make sure that people understand that we could send up a request to have it looked at. So whether or not that, just like our court officers that we made a request to.
there are differences.
Okay. So next subject.
All right, so moving on. One thing I wanted to know is this general? Do we have budgeting for seasonal employees for the Parks Department? Because I didn't see it, and I just wanted to know whether we're doing
No, that was actually agreed upon with the parks foreman. He added his overtime went up a little bit. Sometimes it's harder to monitor the part-timers, and they get more productivity out of their own people.
Madam Supervisor, we do have a little bit budgeted, but that's just for the spray park.
Oh, right.
Attendance.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We do budget for the spray park.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question about file storage. I think I saw it in two different places. One was in general fund, one was in the unincorporated, and I wasn't sure I knew what that was referring to and where that was referring to, so if you don't mind.
I think that's something that we've been talking about for a couple of years with the clerk's office as well. We have been doing a better job, admittedly, of getting a lot of those files out of the attic at 16 Croton. We did move the files from the police station, but we are considering some other options going forward, depending on scanning projects and things of that nature for the next year. So it's certainly something that we can talk about, but we had just a little bit in there if that's the direction we decided to go in for the coming calendar year.
Am I misunderstanding? I'm looking at page 59 of the general budget, and it says file storage, and maybe I'm misreading it, but this is, yeah. 59, general? I think it's general. Is it, oh, you know what? It's unincorporated. I'm sorry. 59 is unincorporated. And,
Yeah. So we have file storage of, there's the $15,000 in file storage that they have there. That's what she's looking at.
Yeah, part of it is a holdover from the 507 North State Road files, but we were talking about whether we were going to need that money to continue to store files elsewhere.
Or because some files you have to store permanently, yeah. And, well, you know what, if it's budgeted and you don't use it, it goes back into the fund balance. So, and again, I want to remind everyone that this is a budget, and I'm sure the next administration will be as diligent as we have been to watch every line, every day, every week, every month, every quarter. And sometimes what you do is if you don't use it in file storage there, you might use it to put all your files on Laserfiche, because more and more files, we need to get more and more files on our Laserfiche. You still have a lot of files, by the way, that even if you have them on Laserfiche, they're permanent files, and you have to keep the paper files. You hope never to have to go look in the boxes and the storage rooms and the what have you, but you do have to keep them forever. So it's a constant thing of working on files.
okay, and I found it is in the general on page 2 where there's another 15.5 where it's 31,000 for file storage. So whatever we could do to change, under the general, it's page 2. On the,
Yeah. Do the expenditure.
page 2, I'm just on page 2 of general, is it, maybe that's, yeah. Yeah, page 2. Yeah, so that's,
This is a revenue line.
I'm sorry, so that was,
that revenue line undoes,
undoes the other one, but that's what I was asking. I was like, I saw it in 2 places. I also saw telephone unincorporated on that same page. What is that telephone?
Is that for the police station still?
Why do we have that?
We do have the 762-6007 number that's still active. We have the signs all over the community in the unincorporated area that say if you need a police officer, call 762-6007.
Can we find out if anybody has called that in a full year?
They actually route into the village police line, so perhaps Lieutenant Sylvester could maybe get that information for us. Otherwise, we could maybe get it from Verizon.
Where do you say we have those signs posted? Because
I know there's one on Ryder Avenue for sure. I pass it all the time.
So my suggestion is to remove those signs and cut this phone. I mean, I don't think anybody's using that phone. I just.
Okay, it's something that we kept as a courtesy.
It's
to
not a
the
lot of money,
unincorporated
I get
residents.
it, but it just seems strange and silly.
I don't think to some senior citizens.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really knows that.
You,
Yeah.
yeah.
ahead, if you know, you let me know.
So, try to not turn my back to anybody. It's probably pretty difficult for us to find out, though you may be able to go to Verizon and find out how many people have called that number. I think the underlying concern is that one person that calls, nobody wants to be the person who says, I canceled that number, and that one person that calls because they were hung up on 6007 being the old number. What we can probably do, if that's what the town wants to do, is phase it out, just talk about how we can do a bit of an information campaign, and, yeah, those signs can come down. That should be paired with whatever other web blasts and Facebook and Nixles and all that kind of stuff to say, this is the date when 6007 will go down. And that's probably the best way to go about doing that, instead of just taking them down. Or those signs on the road may or may not be the reason somebody calls it, but there's a lot of folks that have been in the town for many, many years, and it's just sort of part of the fabric of what we are. So if you do choose to do that, my advice would be we'll do sort of a cooperative information campaign to let people know that we're going to change it. So.
I said it was a weird.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure everybody understands it's $300. Yeah.
The constables or court attendants or court officers, those are under town general? Yeah. Yeah. I just saw constables under here, and it wasn't a lot of money. I didn't know, but I didn't know what.
It might be if they have to, if somebody has to send a constable out for, to give out
Building violations.
eviction notices, building violations. I don't want to say. Yeah.
I only have one last question.
Yep.
I do know that we are losing a highway person next year. There's no budget for that. Is there a budget for that position? Or is that in this budget?
Yes, we budgeted the gentleman's position through his date of retirement, which I believe is August 26th or 29th. So there are going to be 4 months of the year that we have not budgeted that person. And that's in large part due to the fact that this employee has been with us, I believe, 22 years. So the terminal leave, vacation payout are going to be substantial. So Mr. O'Connor has agreed that they can forego having that that last person for the last quarter or the last third of the year. It's going to be difficult on them, but it is quite an expense.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm good. Thank you.
Any questions right now? We'll be talking about this again, so. Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Sure. Please give your name and address.
I'm John Van Steen, 78 South Highland Avenue, Austin, New York. One of the questions that I had earlier in the year before was to do with the salary of the receiver of taxes. And of course, the way that I picked it up on last year's budget was that in the requested versus recommended stage, there was a difference in the two. And this year on page 4, there is a difference in the requested salaries for the tax receiver's office as opposed to the recommended salaries for the tax receiver's office.
Mhm.
So going back to
The salary has been restored for the tax receiver and the highway superintendent as per our agreement with this board. And the difference between those two is the tax receiver requested two full-time people plus herself, so 3 full-time people in her office. And we are going to be maintaining the herself, her deputy, and 1/2 a person.
Good, thank you.
You're very welcome.
And also, I know that Dale Cemetery has come up in conversation over the course.
I think you're going to get a little bit close to your mic, only for the camera more than anything
By
now.
the way, speaking of microphones, didn't I also...
Yeah, we've been working on this one. They were going to get a whole new system in here, and we were
Uh-huh.
waiting for that, so,
Okay.
I know. 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years we've talked with our lips on these mics.
With Dale Cemetery, of course, there was a lot of talk about it this last year as far as the budget was concerned. And I believe that in a previous town hall meeting, you had indicated that what you wanted to do with the budget of the cemetery was to essentially subsidize it with $100,000 coming from the town fund into Dale Cemetery. And looking at the budget for Dale Cemetery, and one of the things that I was interested in, well, okay, what are our total revenues coming in, and what are our total expenses? And if you take a look at the columns in the budget, and also in literally every other section of the budget, there aren't any totals in there. And so for the average person, such as myself, that might be good with numbers, but doesn't have that total mental calculator, it makes it a little bit difficult to read and understand, and also to identify if these different areas are acting in concert. In other words, if revenues and expenses are ultimately the same in those areas. So I'd certainly like clarification on Dale Cemetery, but also...
I'm going to let Maddie do it because she's very familiar with it. But I just want to point out, we did put $100,000. We had planned on putting $100,000 in. The rest of the budget will be paid for with revenues from the cemetery, and it's working out very, very well there. And I would suggest that anyone take a ride through it and see how beautiful that cemetery looks.
No question about the aesthetics.
So Maddie, you want to let Maddie answer that question for you, okay, John?
Yeah. So aside from the $100,000 and then also the revenues produced by the cemetery does have just a bit of fund balance left that has added, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but is adding to the revenue. The expenses and revenues are completely balanced. We can't release a budget that doesn't have those two being balanced. As for how the report is run, that's merely a technical thing I do to save paper when we print the budget. Basically, the way that it can run, and the controller can vouch for me on this, if you choose to have everything have a subtotal, including in each department, each fund, it can run that way. But like I said, in order to save paper, I think we have it down to 65, 70 pages. That's the way that it's run. But we certainly, in the future, I will take that note and do it differently.
Well, mine is only 36 pages, so we can expand a little bit with a couple of toys there. But going back to that point, for instance, I know that one of the things we've tried to do is to get that Dale Cemetery budget essentially under control and at a consistently lower level than it was the previous year, because certainly this is something that's going to add to the taxpayer costs going forward once that fund runs out with the cemetery.
That fund is very close to running out, and that's what Maddie was talking about.
Right.
So we took what was left of the money this year, and it's approximately $127,000. So we put about $65,000. It's about $130,000. So put $65,000 in this year, and we'll have $65,000 for 2017 too.
Right, but to take a look at the progress made in this.
Oh, it's
area
half the budget of last
over
year.
the years, to have these things totaled so that you can just look
Sure.
from one year to the next would just make it much easier, much simpler. And
I will tell you that the budget for the cemetery is 1/2 of what it used to be.
Right, okay, thank you.
Glad to do it.
Good evening, Jerry Gershner. I live at 42 Stonegate Road. Let me just amplify a couple of points that were mentioned before. On the famous police department telephone line, I recall having a conversation with Lieutenant Sylvester a number of months ago, and he told me that he recommended to you, Madam Supervisor, that they not be discontinued because it was of no value and nobody can possibly trace where those calls are coming from. Lieutenant Sylvester's idea to re-educate the people in the town outside as to what the non-emergency number is of the Village of Ossining Police Department is an excellent idea. Let me go on to the mortgage recording tax. I've done a lot of research on it over the last couple of years. I've spoken with staff in the State Controller's office. They've said to me the following. What happens is the mortgage, when someone records a mortgage, the money goes to the county clerk's office. The county clerk then distributes it based upon the location of the home. Those homes that have a recorded mortgage in Bragg Manor gets the check. Same with the home in the Village of Ossining. If it's in the unincorporated portion, the check is made payable to the town of Ossining, but this is only for unincorporated, and it goes to the town, and it's deposited, according to the controller's opinion, correctly, in the town general fund, which means that the residents of both villages are in effect double dipping as they were on the cable TV franchise fee, which got corrected several years ago, and I thank you for that. The controller's office also told me that Ossining is an anomaly because the unincorporated portion is such a small portion of the town where there are two other villages. Usually it's the reverse. I would just tell you, look at Greenberg, look at Mount Pleasant, look at the town of Portland, a couple of tiny villages. Almost everything else is basically unincorporated. And he said to me, he said, the answer is, and he said, it's done all the time, would be to have the state legislature pass special home rule legislation. And all that's needed to start the ball rolling is to have the local legislators introduce legislation specifically for the town of Ossining, doesn't have to be for the rest of the state, to correct the double dipping that exists. That's a fact.
I just want to make one correction for what you said there. It is not done that only the unincorporated monies come in. It's a percentage. It's 50%. I believe it's 50%, Tom? Do you know it offhand? Or it's 50% goes to the town, 25.
You take the assessment and you double it, and then you take out the two village assessments, and what's left is town.
30, 30, 30.
Yeah, but it's not town property, it's town outside
Right.
properties.
So it's going to be a major goal. You can go to the board next year and you can talk to them about it and they can start
I
that ball
certainly
rolling.
hope to do that.
Thank you.
I know that the makeup of the board, I hope next year will be sympathetic to the way the town, unincorporated town residents are being treated.
I have to.
Can I finish speaking?
I'm going to take.
Can I
exception
finish
to that.
speaking?
I'm going to take.
Can I
exception to
finish
that.
speaking? You always have this ability to interrupt people when they're speaking, yet no one does it to you. So I would just ask you to respect that. You and I've spoken to you about this before. I don't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me. Right? On the now infamous 35% allocation of salaries, as Mrs. Jeffrey said, that's a very slippery slope. Because this year it's 35%, and heaven knows where 35% came from. Is it 30? How is it coincidental that of those 4 employees, each of them spend 35% on town outside affairs? I find that striking. All right? And there are so many more employees. Why did you only settle on those 4? Next year, is it going to be 5 or 6 more employees? Where are we going with this? This is really a divisive issue. And I wondered if we do this, does any resident, any member of the town board, I don't know, benefit by it at their real estate taxes? Right? I think the case is if you're living, if you're paying town general taxes, you're going to see a decrease because money is shifted to the town outside. And I think that's a very, very bad idea. And I think that there's a high likelihood that this issue will be revisited in January, and there's a high likelihood that the allocation will be reversed, and then you're going to put a strain on the budget. So I would ask you, perhaps before you do that, maybe you want to consult with some of the incoming members of the board to see how they feel, because they may want to reverse what you're doing because they may deem it to be inequitable and unfair.
Thank you for your comments, and I just want to point out that this board has worked very diligently and very hard for the unincorporated area, the town general, and we have done unbelievable work over the last 4 years, and so have the supervisors before us. I would say that I didn't know that you were telling the new board what to do, so I think that they can make decisions on their own. So if that's the case in January, I'm not quite sure how one would do that, and if they did that, then they change the budget around. But it is not inequitable. We could have said the lawyers spend 50% of their time in the unincorporated area, charge 50%. We could have said that Maddie spends 50% of her time, and maybe the confidential secretary spends 30% of their time. But instead, we took an average of what everyone does, we decided on the number, and that's what it is for this year. It's fair, it's equitable for all, and it's $68,000? $66,000. So, thank you for your comments, sir.
Well, the town outside residents make up about 15%.
Yes.
About 15% of the total town population. So whatever work various officials are doing, it's hard to imagine that they're spending twice the amount of the percentage of the population of the town outside.
We are the umbrella government.
I know
for
you are.
the town general, and we're the local government for the unincorporated. So I have to tell you, sir, we spend a tremendous amount of time on unincorporated business every single day of the week.
I know. I mean, you were just extolling the amount of work that you do for the town outside. Are you extolling the way you had the secret sale of 507 North State Road?
I'm sorry, Mr. Gershner.
Yes.
You were the real estate agent that
That's
told
right.
me that I was the realtor of the year. It was not done that
was a
way.
facetious comment. It was,
Oh my gosh!
it was
Oh my
ex-
gosh! I wish I had a recorder on.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you
It
for
was-
your comments.
Yes, it was a secret sale which violated New York State law.
Oh,
All right, and I'd be glad to show it to you.
oh,
And
you're
also,
so,
you,
that's
and also,
hysterical.
how did you convince the school district to pay part of the purchase price?
What are you talking about?
Okay.
Oh, the pilot?
Yes, that's right, ma'am. That's right. When the seller of the property is the grantor of the pilot agreement, you don't have to give a pilot agreement. You just have to reduce the purchase price by the amount of the pilot. But by having a pilot agreement, I forget the exact number, let's say it was $100,000. The school district kicked in about $60,000 towards the purchase of that property. Were you aware of that? They were not, by the way, because I've raised it with them.
Just like you have your own interpretation of other comments. So thank you
All right.
very, very much.
Oh,
Thank you very. You have your different idea of every conversation you have, sir, and have for the last 4 years that I've been here.
Yes.
So.
And that lease of file space in the attic that town outside residents paid for, all
Thank you for your comments.
right?
Yeah.
Which files could have been removed before the building was sold? Very suspicious.
So this is a budget conversation. So.
Well, no, you were just extolling the virtues of the town.
All right,
board
Mr.
as to how-
Gershner. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We'll miss you.
Hi, Liz Feldman, 122, Underhill Road, Ossining, New York. And I was just looking at the revenue line for the Ossining Boat Canoe Club, but I was just informed that it includes our electric bill.
It's all the
Okay.
different bills that we compiled together. It's the rent and the electric bill and everything that you
Okay,
pay.
that looks better then. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do you have any other questions on the budget? So we want to remind everyone that our public hearing of the budget will be next Tuesday at the legislative meeting, and at 88 Spring Street in the courthouse. And we hope at that time to be passing our new laws that we've been working on. Yeah. We're going to be looking to be passing our new laws that we've been working on. And I know we have some couple of certs there coming in too, right? No? No, I mean the ones we have to vote on, not where you come in and talk to us. So anyway, that should be a long meeting, so I want everyone to eat a good dinner before they come. And yeah. So I think that I think the majority of the folks out there, and that's who we are responsible for, is the majority of the taxpayers in the unincorporated area, for the unincorporated budget, in the town, for the town general budget, and all of the different districts. Have been very pleased. We've gotten good comments on this budget, so we appreciate that. And everyone's allowed their opinion, and all we ask is that facts are friendly. So with that, we'll call it a night, and want to thank you all. This was an early meeting tonight. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, please bring them to the public hearing next Tuesday.